Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the official launch of the second EU Cities Award for Fair and Ethical Trade. My name is Joseph Wozniak. I'm with the International Trade Center, and before we start into the actual details of the second edition of the award, I would like to give the floor to our colleague from DG Trade, Head of Unit, Madeline Taninga. Madeline, the floor is yours. Good morning.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to this second opening event. Yes, and we are very excited about the success that the first launch of the event had. I'm going to give a little introduction on trade policy to put it a bit in the context. And a few words on the award, but Joseph, you will enter into much more detail, so I will leave that to you. Maybe to start by saying that trade policy has achieved a lot. A few examples over the last mandate of the Commission that I wanted to mention are a record number of agreements concluded. We signed 15 trade agreements in the last mandate. And the EU exports now support 36 million jobs. So trade as a key driver for growth. Since '95, EU trade policy initiatives have offered better products at lower prices with estimated annual savings of up to 60 billion annually, which is especially beneficial for low-income households who spend a larger share of income on basic commodities. Sustainability is a key factor and element in our trade policy. Our trade agreements uphold and promote EU values, and every comprehensive EU trade agreement now has legally binding commitments on workers' rights and environment and climate. And we've stepped up enforcement. We've just stepped up our enforcement a while ago with Korea, for which we now have set up dispute settlement proceedings. Maybe also to remind that all our trade agreements in our dedicated chapters on trade and sustainable development refer to fair and ethical trade. So we also promote this, this activity under our trade agreement with our partners. Trade policy is also confronted with new challenges. We observe a crisis of the rules-based international trading system with the increasing recourse by many players to unilateralism and protectionism. We can see a more geopolitical approach of trade by key players where trade is used in an integrated approach together with other policies as an instrument to achieve political and geopolitical goals. And thirdly, trade policy is solicited to contribute to megatrends such as digitalization and rapid technological advances, climate change, demographic shifts, and an increasingly multipolar world. The trade priorities in the new Commission are to preserve a stable, predictable, and rule-based international trading environment. Importance of trade as a tool in uncertain times to push for rules. So we have the WTO reform. We think we need to reform and modernize not only dispute settlement, but also the rule side, whether you talk industrial subsidies, state-owned enterprises, but also topics like climate change, development, and sustainable development goals. Then a second priority for this new Commission is managing key relationships, notably US and China, as well as nourishing the potential of existing relationships with other trading partners by focusing on implementation and enforcement. And those following trade policy will know that we are preparing for the introduction of a Chief Trade Enforcement Officer. Thirdly, our priority is to contribute to other policy fields and overarching topics such as topics and issues that matter for Europe. Example is the Green Deal and EU Fit for Digital Age, and promoting our values and standards globally. So for climate, we want to make sure that trade is in line with climate policy objectives, and see if and how trade policy instruments can further enhance our climate policy. Examples are facilitating green trade and production, and including the Paris Agreement with commitments in our free trade agreements. Sustainable development more generally is also an example. Trade policy, and in particular our trade agreements, are a vehicle to promote and enforce international standards, not only environment, but also on labor, human rights, and other issues like anti-corruption, gender, etc. And the third element would be, of our contribution, would be promoting a level playing field. So promote our standards and protect EU companies and workers from unfair competition. Now the award, the EU Cities for Fair and Ethical Trade Award, is part of the EU's broader efforts to integrate sustainable development goals into trade policy. It contributes to our view that voluntary private or public sustainable assurance schemes can give a strong contribution to sustainable development. The award aims at raising awareness of international trade that respects human rights, labor rights, and the environment through the promotion of support of sustainable, fair, and ethical trade at the local level. It also contributes to current priorities of the Commission, such as the European Green Deal, promoting European way of life, stronger Europe in the world, or bringing European policies closer to European people. And the idea of the award first appeared in the Trade for All strategy, which was presented under our previous Commissioner Malmström in 2015. Since then, we have celebrated one edition with the city of Ghent, winning the title because of the city's government demonstrable commitment to put ideas into practice, a packed program of events, and its impressive pedigree as Belgium's first fair trade town. The winning city has an opportunity to implement development projects in a development project in a third country to support sustainable, fair, and ethical trade in global value chain, and therefore improve the working conditions and the protection of environment in third countries. Apart from the main award for Ghent, the special mentions were assigned to Saarbrücken for inspiring procurement practice, to Lyon for innovation, to Madrid for global partnerships, and to Dortmund for education and community participation. All these cities form a network of EU cities allowing to learn from each other and collaborate for greater impact in promoting sustainable, fair and ethical trade. The network will hopefully expand with this second edition. And this second edition of the award cities that are sustainable trade champions, and we look forward to many, many applications. Let me end by thanking in particular the ITC, and with a particular reference to Petra, for preparing the second edition for the award. I also would like to thank Frenos for again operating as our secretariat. They've organized the event. I'd like to thank the city of Ghent, who come to share their experience for applying, but also for being a winner. I'd like to thank the Committee of the Region for hosting and inviting your members. And I'd like to thank everybody who comes, including familiar faces. And Mr. Scholz, I understand, could not come now, but he joined this morning just before I arrived.
And he'll come back as well.
And he will come back.
Yes.
Excellent. So thank you.
And
maybe, sorry, can I just end egoistically? I'd like to thank Indre.
Yes.
Because Indre is really the pillar of this award. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madeline.
Sorry,
No worries. Thanks very much, Madeline, for those words, setting the stage, and also the background of the first edition of the award. Actually, before we do kick off today, I should introduce our colleagues as well on the dais here. So to the right of Madeline is Indre Vaiskuskate. She's our project manager at DG Trade for this project, and to my immediate left is Petra Walterova, who's the project manager at ITC in our team for the award project, and then Christian Ramon from the city of Ghent. So we will be your, let's say, your interlocutors, speakers this morning. And just before we kind of, let's say, go into some specific details of the award, I think that's why you're gathered here this morning. Just a few words from the ITC perspective on the overall setting of the City Award in the context of our operations and also in the context of sustainable development and trade. So the ITC, just for those of you who are not familiar with the organization, we're a joint organization between the WTO and the United Nations. We've been in operation for almost 60 years now. We're based in Geneva, and our aim is really to work with SMEs in the developing world, in the emerging markets, to improve their ability to access markets in a sustainable way that also yields economic growth opportunities. And as we know, sustainability has become more and more of a front-of-mind topic in recent years, and this has become even more so with the challenges of climate change, for example. So more than ever, the City Award is something that we also want to focus and dedicate our energies to, because for sure, as ITC, we do work with the upstream producer or the processor or the SME in the exporting country. It's also important not to forget that we here, we are all consumers of all types of products that are processed, that are produced and sold from developing country markets. And more citizens are being called to action when it comes to these issues. And so, for example, the Green New Deal is a perfect example of that. So it's a way that we think we can catalyze our experience working in the area of sustainability, especially environmental and social sustainability, to really leverage the activities, the interest of cities, of those inhabitants of those cities and the civil society therein. And we'll get into more specifics in terms of how the award can leverage that. And I think through the interventions not only myself, but Petra and also Christian later this morning, you will see some specific examples of that. So what I'd like to do now is just to briefly present more or less the key takeaways of the first edition of the award. Which was basically held in 2018, and the award, as Madeline mentioned, was issued to the city of Ghent. What we did before that was a lot of preparations, but I think in terms of the key outcomes, what we want to really look at is the call to action, and this is quite important. So really celebrating the EU cities who are championing this type of sustainable trade, sustainable consumption, and sustainable production type activities, and creating opportunities for producers in developing countries. And this can be done in a variety of ways, through city twinnings, through trainings, through partnerships. And one of the specific examples of this will be shown later as we discuss the city cooperation project that we're now embarking upon between Ghent and Sanval in India. And this is an example of specific ways where we can really create opportunities through the award process with the winning city. So in terms of the first edition, as I mentioned, it was issued in June of 2018 here in Brussels. There was an application process which preceded the overall award ceremony. There were 18 cities that expressed interest and actually applied for the award through a process that was conducted online. Of those 18 cities, 7 were shortlisted. And there's one award winner, which is the city of Ghent, and there were 4 special mention cities that Madeline had mentioned. And these special mentions were Dortmund for education and community participation, Lyon for innovation, Madrid for global partnerships, and Saarbrücken for inspiring procurement practices. In terms of the actual, let's say, activities that sprang from the award ceremony itself are really three main areas. One is a network of EU cities. And this is something which we launched post the award ceremony. The second is the development and implementation of a cooperation project with the winning city and a city in the developing world that is somehow in some way, shape, or form, it's aligned with the overall winning city's views and experience when it comes to sustainable trade. And also then a sustainable trade champions report, or a best practice guide, which gives and provides specific examples in terms of what not only the shortlisted cities and the winning city, but also beyond this group of cities, what other EU cities what steps they're taking in relationship to the overall aspect of sustainable trade, fair trade, and how to create linkages between the city itself here in the EU and a city or a collection of cities in the emerging markets. So when I get into the specifics of this, I mean, just to say, and there's a few more slides here that I can go into that show more or less where we are. The network is, I think, key, and this is something where this is when we looked at how do we let's say move beyond the actual award ceremony and the celebration of the city's activities when it comes to these different types of interventions and activities and policies that are fostering sustainable consumption and production. We said, how do we, in a way, make this more of a lasting, tangible exchange of information, a platform to exchange best practices, and the platform that indeed can grow beyond just the here and now. And so that's where the network of EU cities for air and ethical trade, that's the idea that we just developed. So indeed, the network is a group of the winning city plus the shortlisted cities. This network meets twice a year in person. So we had the first meeting last year in Lyon, and we're having a second meeting coming up this spring in Dortmund. And it is an opportunity, and we also have other webinars as well during the year, usually 2 webinars or 3 webinars during the year. And the idea is to exchange, again, these best practices and also understand where cities can actually play a role or perhaps create additional types of activities or programs that can support fair and ethical trade and sustainable type production and consumption. So just to give you an example in terms of the meeting in Lyon, so we had a one-day meeting that was held at the City Hall. We also had interventions from, for example, experts on the circular economy from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that discussed how circular economy type concepts can be embedded into cities and municipalities. But then we also had a tour of a variety of small fair trade shops in Lyon that are essentially promoting the type of consumption and production patterns that we want to engage in. And additional types of topics will then be discussed in future types of network meetings, both physical meetings in person, but also then the webinars. And the idea is that this network expands with each iteration of the award. So we have the current shortlist of the 2018 edition, but then later this year, when we award the second winner in Ghent, we will then actually expand the network with the winning city and that shortlist. So just to say, there is also a legacy, if you will, when it comes to the award. There's also as I mentioned earlier, and Madeline mentioned, there is a developmental cooperation project, and this is something also quite I would say specific, concrete, that will have also a legacy. And here is to say, okay, when we award the winner is chosen for a variety of reasons. And so, for example, with Ghent, we talked about having their ideas that they have developed, putting them into practice, moving them into, if you will, a certain level of reality. And this, in the Ghent tradition, as Christoffel discussed, is more or less focused on the textile and apparel type sectors, going back into Ghentian history, but also with a specific issue or component on the social and labor type issues. And these are obviously front of mind issues from a perspective of all of us as consumers. and also from the perspective of brands and retailers that are selling garments and apparel. And so there are bottlenecks, there are issues with relationship to implementing these types of social and labor concerns and practices in developing countries. We know that. There are barriers toward awareness from a public sector level, from a citizen level, from a industry level, and the means to communicate and increase awareness of best practices and how to move toward more, let's say, sustainable production. How do you develop a fair trade city concept in these types of countries? And so through an open process of expression of interest process, I should rather say, the city of Sanwal, India, which is north of New Delhi in the Punjab region, was selected to be the participant, if you will, or the beneficiary of this development cooperation project, which springs from the award. And so we're now in the process of really kicking that off. In fact, we'll be going to India in just 2 weeks for the first mission. And indeed, at the end of the process, we will have representatives from the city that will come to the award ceremony in Ghent at the end of the year to talk about what the actual interaction between Ghent and Sanwal included and what types of steps they can take into the future. So this is not a prescribed type of project. I mean, it depends on the circumstances of the city, of the winning city, of the issues that are of interest to them. It is driven by the city, it is driven by Ghent, not by ITC. We can leverage our networks and our different contacts on the ground and the ability for us to recruit and work with consultants and things like that to support the overall implementation. But it is indeed the city that is driving this project, and I think that's important to note. And then last but not least, the final, let's say, tangible product that was springing from the award in 2018 was this Sustainable Trade Champions guide or booklet, and so I have it here, and it's also available on the website, on the EU Cities for Fair and Ethical Trade website. But it was previously called the Living Book, but we have renamed it in terms of kind of the Champions Guide, in the sense that it really provides more information on what cities are actually doing in this area. And I think from this perspective of new applicants, it provides a wealth of information of concrete type activities and steps and programs and policies that cities are actually undertaking. It's really a way to, a lot of this is quite, in some ways can be, when you start to get into specifics about what we're actually doing, I think this book, this practice guide is actually quite helpful in providing a lot of real examples. And there's a wealth of data not only from the shortlisted cities, but also additional EU cities that are engaging in fair and ethical trade and sustainable trade practices with partnering cities. Also to note, in terms of just a change from the first edition, which was in 2018, to now the 2020 award, we have kind of updated, refreshed, if you will, the look and feel of the branding of the award. And so on the screen in front of you, you see the new logo, and this has been done in conjunction with our partner Phrenos, who's helping us not only with the visual identity of the award, but also as Secretariat. Phrenos is also helping us with the overall marketing, dissemination of the award, the application process, and the organization of the various meetings, such as our launch event today, and indeed as well the ceremony that we'll have in Ghent for the award issuance in October. So to kind of move to, I would say, the specific data that, or information, as it were, that would be important to any city that is applying, and I think this is really kind of the key details, these next slides. And we have Q&A after my remarks, and so feel free that anything that I don't cover now, we can spend time on answering any of those questions. But just to give you the summary information, so in terms of who's eligible to apply. So cities in EU member states with a population of over 20,000 inhabitants are eligible to apply. This is the same exact policy we used for the first edition in 2018. And it should be noted, and this is very important, that any city stakeholder can launch the application. So that could be an NGO, that could be a civil society organization, that could be a company, as it were. It's not necessarily the city hall that has to actually launch the application. However, and this is very important, there is a mayoral declaration. And so the city hall, the municipality, the mayor or the administrator of the city, she or he has to sign the mayoral declaration that they're aware of they're aware of the application, and they support the application, and they agree to the terms of contest of the overall city award. And why is that important? Because, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in terms of the development cooperation project, this implies the cooperation of the city staff, of the various, some departments. It involves the travel of city representatives, not only to the award ceremony, but to the network events and things like that. So it's very, very important that the city is on board and is knowledgeable of the application. So that's a quite important point. So what are we looking for here in terms of applications, in terms of the overall, let's say, content? I mean, first is a vision, a strategy, and certain objectives that the city has vis-a-vis fair and ethical trade, sustainable trade, consumption, and production. And linked with that vision are policies that go along with that vision, that help to support that vision or carry out that vision. And then activities and initiatives that essentially can make the policy or effectively carry out the policy on a day-to-day level that is apparent or viewable or realizable from the perspective of the population and also the cities in the emerging markets, basically. So it's really about strategy, about vision. It's about policies that support that vision, and then translating those policies into action through activities. And why would you want to apply for the award? So there's a variety of reasons in terms of application, the motivation to apply. One is that obviously recognition of being the recipient, being the winner of the EU City for Fair and Ethical Trade in 2021. So the title will be for 2021 because that's actually the year that you will carry that title after the award ceremony. But beyond that, given the fact that issues such as the Green New Deal, issues such as climate awareness, these types of conditions that we're talking about are becoming more and more at the fore of our thinking, not only at the policy level, but actually at the consumer level, at the public level. I think recognition of a city's contribution is very important, and I think can not only add to that recognition, but there's visibility that can then be increased by it. And so being a leading city that is dedicated policy and activities toward these types of issues is very important. There's also the idea of inspiring your activities and inspiring your policy framework with new ideas. So, and this is the idea of the network. This is the idea of being part of a group of different cities that's growing, that allows this type of interconnectivity that probably doesn't exist today because there's a lack of time or context. There's no other, let's say, network that can really that's existing today from our research that really takes that role. And so it's a way to inspire your local activities, to scale them up, to perhaps even do additional types of joint or partnership projects with even other cities in the EU. Then there's also the cooperation project, which I think is also quite novel. It's quite interesting in the sense that it allows really, it allows the city to do something meaningful in the local country context that likely they don't have the wherewithal or the scale or the networks to do. And so, and again, the mechanics of this project is that it's not, and I should probably will come up in the Q&A, but I should mention that it is a project that is funded by DG Trade. The funds come to ITC, and then ITC takes care of the financial obligations and requirements of this project. So it's not a cost, if you will, in terms of a financial cost on the city. For example, the winning city does not have to bear a financial cost in terms of implementation. That is covered. That's part of the prize, if you will, as it were, of the award. So it's something that is the cost is borne by ITC through DG Trade, but then the city of Ghent, for example, or the winning city in this year will then be able to take advantage of that to implement something concrete on the ground. Also, it's the Sustainable Trades Champions report that I mentioned earlier as well. Having your city's information in that report, that publication, that is a growing publication. It is something which, from our perspective, is very novel and also new, because there is really nothing like that exists in terms of really capturing and encapsulating and disseminating all the different activities that cities are undertaking. And then last but not least, I think also just the idea to be an ambassador of this type of concept in the EU context, where with the Green Deal, with the new Commission, being an ambassador, being able to speak across different, let's say, areas, whether it's in the Committee of the Regions, whether it is through the European Parliament, different areas, different aspects. Being an ambassador, or being able to have your voice heard by a larger group in the EU, I think, is something that is quite important. So the application process kicks off today, and the application is available online as of this morning. There is a lot of information that we have improved since the last iteration of the award to help city applicants. We find that the city application process is, I would say, easier this time than last time, based on feedback that we received and we have incorporated. The application deadline is the 12th of June this year. So we have a longer application period than we did in the first iteration of the award. The application is encouraged. We encourage you to submit the application in the English language, but it is possible to submit the application in any of the 24 EU working languages, and then we will take it upon ourselves then, once we've received the application, to translate that into English for the assessment and the evaluation process. We want to make the overall application process itself relatively straightforward and defined in terms of what type of information you provide us. So we're not asking for a lot of extraneous different types of information, but rather it's relatively defined. So, for example, there is evidence required to support a claim that an applicant city makes in the application, but we're only going to limit that to 3 pieces of evidence. So it's not as if you have to supply us with 10 pieces of different documents or data, but rather three pieces of evidence per question. So it's really a limited number of documents that can be provided per question. Also, in terms of word limit, we're trying to move toward concision and brevity, as opposed to long text and things like that. So there is an application word limit of 4,000 words. Pardon me? Sorry, 4,500, just to be clear, sorry. 4,500 words. Those 500 words are probably quite key. so anyway, we are aiming at that level of concision. I mentioned earlier that the mayoral declaration is required, and so, I mean, that is, I know I keep on mentioning that, but it's really important. And I would say, from our experience from the previous iteration of the award, if you're interested in applying, that's fantastic, but please advise and engage with your municipality. So if you're not part of the municipality, if you're not part of the mayor's office, if you're an NGO, for example, or civil society, and you want to put together an application, that's fantastic. But please do engage with your municipality, with the city administration ahead of time, just because it may take. I mean, they may need to table this initiative at the city council to get approval, right? And that takes time to put it on the agenda of the meeting, to have discussion, X, Y, and Z, and then finally to receive the mayor's approval or signature. So his or her signature is on the paper, which needs to be then scanned, PDF'd, and then uploaded to the portal. So our advice would be to start that process as soon as you can. We will also be doing a series of webinars, which will be essentially 1-hour webinars. We did this last time, and I think it was very helpful. We'll start these this month, February through May, and these will be open webinars at different times, and they will help to A, answer any questions you have, and B, go over 2 key documents that are relative to this process. One is the rules of contest, and the other is the application itself and the guidelines on the application. So in terms of the application form, all of this information is provided on the website, which we will show in a few minutes on this screen. But just to say that we have, again, tried to make not only the application form, which is an online form, but also we have the written document, which is in a PDF, which you can also download, as I would say, as straightforward as possible. I mean, there's basically 2 different, let's say, sections to the application. The first section is where we have what we call the city summary pitch and the city context criteria. So this is the overall, let's say, it's the kind of the roof, I guess, if you're looking at it kind of from a metaphoric perspective. And the roof is really, that's the overall kind of reason why you want to apply for this award. What's the pitch? Why do you think that you should be the winner of this edition? And then also be under that pitch is the city context. And so context questions, and I'm just reading here from the actual document, is the size of the city, the population size, age distribution, nationalities, for example, employment rate, things like that. It's basically demographic and economic structure data. And on the application form, you will see which actual data points are required and which ones are, if you will, optional. So once this first section is completed, which is the summary pitch and then the city context criteria, then we start going into the questions, the specific questions related to the application, and there's basically 6 of them. And so these, again, align with more or less what I said earlier in terms of the vision, the objectives, the motivation of the city, the policies, the systems, the actions the city is undertaking when it comes to fair and ethical trade, sustainable trade, the enabling environment the city is enabling or is developing, I should say, or promoting, the awareness-raising events that the city is hosting, or through its networks or civil society or other private sector organizations, whatever the case may be, those types of awareness-raising activities that are being held. Specific initiatives by city stakeholders, again, not just the city hall, but stakeholders. The entire ecosystem of the city or municipality is really relevant here. And then measurement and evaluation. So if you're doing certain projects, you're implementing certain activities, how are you measuring the results? How are you measuring or evaluating what's happening, if possible? And then the last question is also what your idea or pitch would be for a future development project with ITC. So if you were the winning city, what would you like to do in the field? We'd like to do this because of our background in this country, or with this type of stakeholder or this type of NGO partner. We would like to engage with ITC in doing something along these lines. And so any information that you can provide in that sense to give more specifics on your vision for that would be very much appreciated. In terms of the overall evaluation criteria, again, this is all articulated very, in a very detailed way in the guidelines document and the rules of contest. But the evaluation criteria, basically covering the overarching substantive aspects of the different questions that we're posing. So, looking to really evaluate the strategy and direction that has been stated, understanding and evaluating the depth and innovation or the innovative aspects of the initiatives. So how innovative are the initiatives that the city engaging in? what type of stakeholder engagement participation is there? Is it a very high level? Is it a very broad level? Is it deep? What are the different types of organizations that are represented? Do they have, and what are the types of frameworks to evaluate or measure impact and output? And then how is the overall, let's say, presentation and communication of the content provided in terms of the overall clarity of the document and the ability to also, if you will, pitch your city in a way that is compelling in a very brief format. I should note, in terms of the evaluation process, there are really two steps. Once the applications are received, there is an evaluation committee, which is composed of 10 individuals. There is an open call for expression of interest to join the evaluation committee. It's a non-paid position. The evaluators do it on a pro bono basis. They meet in person to decide not only the winning city, but also the shortlist. But the shortlist, and also provide some indications as to the special mentions. And ITC, we will be responsible for essentially the overall expression of interest to constitute the evaluation committee shortly in the next several months. After the evaluation committee meets with their overall shortlist and then the kind of ideas on special mentions, that shortlist is then transferred to a jury. Again, the jury is composed of 7 individuals, and this is all laid out in the rules of contest. But those 7 individuals then are composed of a variety of actors from the private sector, the public sector, NGOs, the European Commission. There's an ITC representative, civil society. And there's also a rapporteur who comes from the evaluation committee, and he or she, depending on the rapporteur, he then is able to, or she will then brief the jury on the deliberations, and the jury will then decide on the ultimate winner, plus the honorable mentions, basically. That is all done in camera. It's all embargoed until, obviously, the award ceremony date. This last slide that I have before we can open to Q&A is more or less the kind of trajectory where we're going. So today, the 4th of February, we launched the application online. We will be conducting webinars. These webinars will be, we have a mailing list, but also they'll be announced on the website and through our various social media channels, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram. We will then be communicating the webinar dates that will provide more information. The application date is, I believe, 6 p.m. CET, 1800 CET, on 12th of June, and that is a fixed deadline. One thing about the application, which also is important to note, is that cities can save their application. If you're not quite finished, let's say you want to start adding your data, you want to start completing your application, that's fantastic. You can save a draft. Say maybe you're waiting for the mayoral declaration, or say you're waiting for some quantitative information from a different colleague. You can fill everything out and save it in draft, and you can resave it if you want. But when you submit it, it's final. So there's only one chance to really submit that application. So please be aware of that. So everything has to be complete before you have to submit that application. And once that application is completed, you cannot actually take it back into draft mode. Also, the system is set up where if a critical piece of information is not provided in the application, you will not be able to push that submit button. You have to complete all the various questions. If for some reason you're not able to complete a question, or for whatever reason the question is not applicable to your particular context, that's fine. Just please make sure that you indicate that and the reason why in the application. Sorry, it's a bit of a parenthesis, but I just wanted to state that before I concluded. Then from June through August, we have the evaluation process with the evaluation committee and the jury. As I mentioned, the jury decision will be taken in September, and then after that, it follows the following month with the award ceremony in Ghent. So that's more or less where we are, and I think that is the end of my remarks. This is the website where you can find all the information that I spoke of today. You can find the rules of contest. You can find the Sustainable Trade Champions report, and obviously the online application with all the details. So I think I'll stop there and then open for any questions. All clear? No questions?
Yes, maybe.
Really, it's all clear. Okay, we did a good job. Then.
Perfect job.
Exactly.
Okay, because there's detailed questions on certain issues, and I just make sure that. No? Okay. Anything you want to add on the process?
And I think we break for coffee now. Unless
Yeah. Who intends to?
Who's interested?
Who's interested in? Well, if I could just say, maybe if you could raise your hands if you're from a city here.
and you should raise a hand as well.
Sorry.
In which? Sorry, may I ask which city? Hamburg. Okay. 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 And then from any, let's say, organization that represents cities or would have contacts with cities in your country or in your region. Just maybe if you could just briefly introduce yourself. We met before at the coffee break in the morning. Yes, please. I don't want you to put you on the spot, but sorry.
It's here. Everyone hear me, yes? So I'm not from the city, I'm from the counties, 5 counties the cities, 5 counties of Croatia, from the southeast region. But the city are also in this sub-government level, so we are cooperating. There are big 5 cities, but we have a lot more, 20 cities in just one counties, more than 20,000 people. We have a potential.
Okay. Thanks very much. And with ICLE, I mean, there was a member of ICLE on the evaluation committee last time as well on the jury, so we know ICLE very well. And I would just say that in terms of dissemination of the award, I mean, we'd like to count on your help and support in disseminating the knowledge of the award, not only through us at ITC, but also through our colleagues and partners at Frenos. So Jessica Frommer is here from Frenos. She's also managing the project from their side. And please, I mean, we have a social media platform now, whether it's Instagram or whether it's Facebook. We're doing, obviously we're tweeting these days. Also from our side at ITC, we are here to kind of really spread the word about this, and this can be done through a variety, not only through the webinars, but through a variety of different means. And so if you have any ideas or you'd like additional information, there's also a one-pager. There's a one-pager which we will provide on the table. You received that? Okay, with the badges, so you have the one-pager. That's also available on PDF on the website, and so that can be shared with colleagues. But and if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Petra, myself, or Jessica. So, all right, I guess we'll break for coffee, and we'll come back at 11:15. Great, thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you very much to those who stayed on for the second part. We will now cover a little bit more on the topics that Joe already mentioned. So I'll try to skip those parts that he really elaborated on quite a lot already, so that we don't have too much duplication. But the second part is essentially done by me and Christoph from the city of Ghent, where we really look back to look forward for the second award. So we'll just present a little bit more in depth the network of the cities that we created effective the last year and the Sustainable Trade Champions report, and then Christoph will go a little bit more into what it really means to actually be the first winner, I should say, really, of this award. So first, a little bit more on the network. We started back in 2018. when we decided to put together the shortlisted cities for a little bit of an informal technical workshop before the ceremony of the first award happened. And I actually took this slide from the presentation of ICLEI. Back then, we had your ICLEI colleague participating in that workshop where we were looking what the European urban agenda is. What are the sustainability topics? There's nothing on trade, really. So we really felt that there is a space for cities to come together and discuss fair and ethical trade, sustainable production and consumption as related to that. We've gone quite a long way since then, since June 2018, and we did establish the network out of all the shortlisted cities, all the 7 shortlisted cities for the first award. Where we essentially worked out already quite a few pieces of the entire structure of the network, how it's going to work, what is it going to do, and this is where we are right now. So as I said, we formed the network in June 2018. We took few steps where we only had a few cities presenting on the award that year, but we really got together more closely in 2019, where we solidified the network a little bit, and I should really say we did it jointly with the cities. It wasn't only ITC or the European Commission driving this effort, but we really tried to do everything in a participatory way, an approach where we literally co-created what we call terms of reference of the network together with the cities. We even had some submissions by the cities where they suggested governance bodies even for the network. We eventually all opted for a more informal structure. So right now the network is not institutionalized as such. It's really an informal, I would say, group of cities who are willing and able to meet and to talk and to share best practice in the area of fair and ethical trade. And that's what it is really right now. ITC coordinates this network with the help of the funds by the European Commission, DG Trade, as we said. DG Trade is also involved very much in the network in terms of really jointly being, and I say contributing with ideas and direction of the network. Apart from the 5 cities that we already mentioned, who were awarded in one way or another in June 2018, we also have the city of Malmö and Vitoria-Gasteiz in the network. I prepared a little bit of how it's really organized right now, because we get questions actually on that in terms of who is invited to the network, who can be part of it, can there be many members, just a few members. So we really did establish everything in the terms of reference, which are, it's a formal document that was adopted by the network in September 2019 during the first in-person meeting of the network that Joe also mentioned already. Where we really lay out the conditions for these 2 years, 2019 and 2020. And we do expect that with the second award, we might rework these terms a little bit, depending on how many cities join, what their preferences will be, etc. Right now, the membership is really limited to shortlisted cities only. So it's a closed group that expands through each edition of the award. We have the option open for expanding this and maybe including even, let's say, interested organizations or independent experts, such to actually be part of the network. We would then rework, let's say, the terms of reference. The experts are already, let's say, a little bit affiliated. We do have for each of the meetings, we do invite experts, as Joe mentioned, for instance, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation on Circular Economy. So it's really usually topics that the network identifies as these can be interesting to elaborate on and actually learn something new from someone external. In terms of its governance, we don't really have a super formal structure, but the award winner, the standing award winner, is co-chairing the meetings with a DG Trade representative, which in our case right now is Indra. And again, we facilitate as ITC, we facilitate the meetings or the webinars or anything that's happening. Currently, we usually invite 1 or 2 members for each of the meetings, and I'll speak a little bit about the meetings later. And there are no, let's say, binding decisions taken by the network right now. It really is a platform to share experience and good practice on any of the topics that we selected to discuss. We currently have, I think so far it's really 1 in-person meeting a year Possibly we'll also have more, and then we do several webinars on selected topics. The meetings are usually really guided by certain topics that we agree on in advance. Travel costs for those people are actually supported by ITC. So this is really the benefit that the cities get in a way as well. They don't have to invest, of course, their own funds, at least not for these meetings. To be able to meet, we need 2/3 of the membership, which currently is 5 cities. We always had actually more than that. And we usually agree on exactly the topics that we discuss ahead of the meeting. So it's also actually part of the meeting is always what is it that we're going to discuss further on in the next couple of months even. We also encourage the cities, and maybe Christoph will speak a little bit about that, to present in other conferences and events. We had a presentation at the Fairtrade Towns, International Fairtrade Towns Conference by Jonathan here, for instance. We had Christoph participating in other fora. So we are trying to really, let's say, raise the profile a little bit of this agenda at the city's level. What do we do mainly is really to meet. I think it's already quite clear from what we've said so far. Here are a little bit color-coded, let's say, the events that we've organized so far. In the bluish, it's really those in-person meetings where we had the 6 to 7 cities actually met in person physically and exchanging and really in a very organized way as a workshop. Those in a peach color, it's actually those events where the cities were invited to speak, only a selection of the cities. And we also do have quite a few online meetings, which are usually webinars on a very specific topic. So I'll go a little bit into detail of that as well. The second in-person meeting now is confirmed to happen in Dortmund in Germany, which is one of the shortlisted cities as well, at the end of April. And we will actually look at the future initiatives and possibly cooperation, which would be really a next step in terms of maybe creating some joint initiatives in the area of fair and ethical trade by the cities. This is how it looks a little bit. I'm going to maybe skim a little bit through these slides. This was a presentation by the cities of Ghent, Madrid, and Lyon at the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, for instance. So it was one of those which was not an official meeting of the network, but it was really where the cities are encouraged to speak to a broader audience about these initiatives on fair and ethical trade and sustainable consumption and production generally. It fits super well with the topic that was essentially at the sidelines of the General Assembly in 2018, which was really sustainable consumption and production, SDG 12. So it really nicely fits in this as well. This is the in-person meeting. I think you've seen this picture before in Lyon in 2019. These in-person meetings, I mean, we did one tangibly in September, the second one in April this year, which are really workshops where we really sit down in as much as possible informal way, and we really just discuss the topics. Of course, we guide the discussion, and so that it's structured, and we actually have some takeaways. So I just listed here, let's say the potential future areas of work for the network which we discussed. So it's really concrete things like data collection, best practices for impact of the initiatives that the cities put forward, or developing a master plan on trade on fair and ethical trade in the city, which was a kind of a common theme, actually, as it happened in 2019, because we had the city of Saarbrücken discussing it during one of the webinars for the network, because they already did such a thing. So again, we went really deep down in terms of what they did, how they did it, and the other cities had the possibility to ask other questions and get inspired, really. Any questions at this point? I'll probably actually do the Q&A this way on the network. Are we, again, super clear? Okay, I'll take it as a positive sign. So let me then turn to what Joe also already mentioned, which is the Sustainable Trade Champions report, which is something that is solely based on the applications by the cities from the 2018 edition. We took quite a bit of time to develop this, but it's really something which we would like to show and take also as a tangible benefit for the cities to bring and take it forward with them in their promotional activities and awareness raising, and again, as a source of inspiration for their own initiatives. We are calling it sustainable trade, not fair and ethical trade, also because we really didn't have any specific definition of fair and ethical trade in the beginning to start with in 2017 when we were launching the first award. And we did have a living book in place, which was a similar publication actually, but very much based on global experience. I mean, there were really examples from many different parts of the world and what the cities were doing on sustainability almost as a whole. Back then, that was the guidance for the cities to apply for the first edition. So this refined living book, in a way, in 2019, 2020, is really becoming a much more streamlined guidance document for the cities to actually see what really EU cities are doing. In terms of the scope then, during the application process for the first award, we really let the cities construe what the meaning of fair and ethical trade was for them. Exactly because there was no specific definition, they didn't have to fit in a specific category. We wanted to see what the process actually brings and what is really out there. And that's exactly what happened. We got 18 applications that were immensely rich in content, in all the initiatives that these do and develop, and how they really enlighten their citizens in terms of more sustainable consumption, generally sustainable trade. For instance, the Hanseatic cities, they really focus a lot on the trade aspects, of course, just by tradition, and really how they are changing mindsets. So we really took all of that. In 2019, we did a big internal review after the evaluation committee. I should say that we also have a member of the evaluation committee here today with us, of the former one. We reviewed all the applications, we really dissected them. We also took the evaluation committee reports and did additional outreach and research, really, with the cities and for the cities, so that we essentially put together a long list of 13 applications to feature. So you will not find all 18 applications in a way featured there, but it's really 13 that were, let's say, the most inspiring ones. We tried to do really a profound analysis in a way to try to find common themes. That exactly because we didn't have the definition, so we were kind of almost devising a definition out of that through identification of the big common themes. And then we validated all of this with the European Commission and published it essentially early this year. These are the 13 cities that are currently featured there. You really see a lot of representation from the Western Europe. It's also because most of the applications really came from the Western Europe. We hope to be changing that for the next award. And many are really from Germany. In Germany, the fair and ethical trade notion is really well established, also through a national award scheme that's well established. And again, as I said, for instance, the cities in the northern part of Germany, in the Hansa, the notion is really well established already, and the cities are incredibly active in this area. When I was speaking about the themes that are really pertain the report, and you will see it throughout the report, these are what we then translated also into the application form for the second award in a way. So in a way, this is really what creates a strong and comprehensive city approach towards promoting sustainable trade, fair and ethical trade. It's putting the trade on the city agenda in the first place. That's why we ask about objectives and strategy. It's to support sustainable business models, really work with the local businesses and business actors. Using the city's purchasing power for sustainable trade, again, for instance, we had a lot of other presentations on that specifically. Ensuring the impact of the city initiatives, which is why we're asking about measurement systems in place, for instance, in the application form. Then we also focus on citizen awareness generally. This is really an awareness-raising exercise in the first place. Educating the responsible consumers of tomorrow. You will see a very interesting part on Dortmund's Faire Kita. I think that's also a project that's running in other parts of Germany, where they really educate already young pupils on fair trade. Involving civil society to drive positive change, also a very important part, and then the global partnership. So it's really bottom-up and top-down approach in a way in that. We did have there were, let's say, two kind of common themes that also pertain to all of the applications where let's say that where the vision was very clear for the city, and that was that there was a personal support structures in place. There was usually dedicated personnel in the city that would actually take care of this agenda and put it forward. And somehow the fair and ethical trade and so, let's say, related topics needed to be in the city's DNA, so to speak. So again, the Hansa or textile sector, for instance, for Ghent, etc. It really kind of clearly shown through that this is important. There were also some commonalities, interestingly, between the frontrunner cities at the level of individual activity. So even though they were, for instance, not, let's say, coordinating on this, on how to put forward this agenda in the city, it was really these. Public procurement, very prominent, development of different guides to actually, let's say, stimulate the public awareness of these issues and these topics. Organizing guided city tours or even creating labels for businesses. The city of Lyon was very, very well involved in that. Dedicated events, festivals, workshops, breakfasts, all of that to actually enhance awareness and understanding among citizens specifically, so really targeted towards the citizens of the city and or region. Focus on educational activities to sensitize the youngest of the citizens, as I mentioned before, and then online information tools. So there are really many different areas that cities actually take action in, but these were somehow common to more than one city. This is already getting a little bit closer to the, let's say, the end of the presentation. I didn't essentially go to the individual examples to present those, because I want you to read the report, of course. But these are really how when I was speaking about the 8 themes, these are the initiatives essentially below these themes. So for the changing consumption through awareness, we have, for instance, the city of Ghent or the city of Cologne in Germany, and when they really do a lot of, let's say, involving of the very diverse community and society in the city in the awareness raising. For the education, we've got the citywide Fair Deke certification. In terms of involving the civil society, there's a municipal trade forum, fair trade forum in Madrid, Action Alliance for Sustainable Trade Education in Hamburg. So again, these are the things that are now featured in the report. These are the other ones. This is the other 4. And I would really invite you to take a look at it, especially if you're from a city or if you work with the cities, because this is really a compilation that hasn't been compiled really before. It's something that's new, that was missing, we really feel, in the landscape as general, and hopefully can be really helpful to the cities. We really plan on enhancing this as we go forward, of course, with the 2nd edition. So hopefully this will really become a proper living document now, but really focused on the practice of the EU cities, and hopefully also from cities in Croatia, not only the western part of Europe. Any questions on the report as such, on how we produced it, or who we featured, or anything like that? Or what you can do with it? Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. Actually, I have a question that perhaps is linked both to the report and the network. Have you been following and evaluating to what extent belonging to a network or having the report has been useful for the cities or cases of replication? That would be very useful.
So right now, this is something that I think is very much a budding stage in a way. So we know already that the city started to inform each other about certain initiatives, for instance, but this really will take time to somehow see how actually people can get inspired. I'm not sure whether Christoph can actually mention a little bit about that. We know that, for instance, the city of Ghent is very interested in getting a master plan for fair trade in place, where the city of Saarbrücken then can, and is actually already a big source of inspiration. So this is something that we see kind of as a thread already throughout the meetings and as we speak together. But I think it will take a little bit more time to really, let's say, take proper ground and root in a way. But hopefully this work will continue further on as well for the next years, because really in theory this takes years to happen. We also had quite a nice discussion in Lyon in September in terms of the labeling system for local businesses and other players, actually. Restaurants, they're also part of that, cafes, etc. And this also seems to be something that's interesting to the other cities. But again, we're very much in the first part of that conversation. We as ITC, for instance, are trying to exactly keep track of this and then put it on the agenda of the next meeting so that we move in this direction. Any other questions? Yes?
I just would like to ask you something about the awarding criteria. If like you consider mainly the products, if the fair trade of the products, or you also consider transportation mode, for example, like if the cities has put in place a logistics that's like is more sustainable, or
That's a good question. The evaluation framework is a little bit wider and let's say a high level. So there's a lot of scope for interpretation. Essentially, the cities are really invited to present as much as possible in terms of what their initiatives, plans, policies, actions are. It can be both, but it also can be many other things. And then it's really up to the evaluators to see what they would consider as something that's really worth highlighting in terms of awarding that city for that or that. We don't have hard criteria, as you mentioned, for instance, right now, let's say as a proportion of products being fair trade in the shelf of the shops, or whether the logistics or the transportation system on actually getting the stuff in the city is in place or not. That's not really there. This sort of criteria, not yet. We're still inviting rather a wide spectrum of initiatives to kind of come to us so that we actually see first what's really happening. If we have any sort of criteria in the future, I cannot tell right now. We might get there, we might not. But generally, it's really rather about getting the bigger picture and seeing, and this is actually one of those things that we really emphasize when we have, for instance, the applicant webinars, because these questions come quite often. And we always say, we really value a lot an entire well-rounded application when you explain in your words, in your activities, in your actions, what is it that you actually do and what you consider fair and ethical sustainable trade from your perspective, from your background, from your context, etc. So it's also to give space to the diversity, let's say, of the cities and their approaches in the EU. Thank you for the question. If there's no one, yes?
In the criteria, do you also consider the possibility for a city to comprehend in their projects also the region, or at least the province?
That's also a very good question. Yes, we do. If you remember, Joe was presenting the application form. We've got a part in the beginning which is called context criteria. That's exactly to give the cities the space to explain their background. Where is it that they come from? So that the evaluators then have not only, let's say, the story on the fair ethical trade in the city, but they can somehow overlay it with the background of the city and when they come from. It's really coming back a little bit to the DNA that I was discussing as well a little bit before. So it's there. We really wanted to give again space to, I mean, we are speaking about cities that have above 20,000 people, which it's quite a wide pool of cities, of course, across Europe, or the EU, I should say. But I mean, they are, of course, inherently very much different, and we give space to the cities to actually explain why they are, where they're coming from. They also are encouraged to even mention their the population ratios, for instance, and the age structure even, and the membership, even the structure of the international trade that's somehow connected to the city, for instance. So all of that is information that the evaluators then have at hand. If there's no one else, I think I'm running out of time a little bit, but I'll just quickly mention a little bit more maybe about the development project with Ghent, even though I'm quite sure that maybe Christoph will cover that a little bit as well. And again, Joe introduced it. It's really this is the prize for the winner of the award. So it's really the development project that we only do with the winner, but we also share the knowledge as we move forward during the network meetings with the other cities. And we even had ideas of actually having the other cities somehow involved in this development project in terms of at least sharing knowledge and learning from the project, really. So right now we're going to cooperate with the city of Sahnewal in Punjab, India, as you mentioned. The reason for that is we selected them eventually because first they expressed interest to work with us as part of the call for expression of interest. We had 6 expressions, actually, 3 from Vietnam, 3 from India. And the city of Sahnewal is where a textile and garment production is taking place. And their application mentioned that the system is really collapsing, and they would really welcome a cooperation project that would actually help them revive this through turning more to sustainability schemes, essentially, and getting certified, etc. So we really thought that it fits really nicely, the both cities' DNAs, in terms of Ghent really having been the hub in the past and now also really thriving from that. And the city of Saarnebal being in that situation right now. And we essentially thought that this is really the best match. So what we are going to do with them is to try to map a little bit and assess the municipality needs and capacity gaps to become such a hub, let's say, or change agent for more sustainable production and trade. We're planning to release a report and a work plan for them really to use actually in the decision-making process. And alongside, we'll be carrying out in the summer months a few interactive workshops with the municipality administrators and other interested parties in the local ecosystem, including probably the medium or small and medium-sized enterprises, factories in that area, on the topic of fair and ethical trade, but really focusing on the responsible production practices, where ITC also will essentially fit really well. Our program specifically on sustainable standards will fit really well with the expertise. So we've identified this as a kind of an overarching topic, and then the city of Ghent, jointly with us, will also identify a few more in terms of us essentially plugging in with the Ghent-specific knowledge on certain aspects like supporting community participation in this entire process, and much more will really be defined through the first scoping mission that's going to happen later this month. So I think I will leave it there, so I also give enough space to Christoph. But again, if there are any questions on the development project right now, maybe you can raise your hand at this point, and then we can wrap up with a Q&A, of course, after Christoph's presentation as well. No one on this one specifically. Thank you very much anyway, and I'll pass the floor to Christoph.
Thank you, Petra. Good afternoon. I'm Christoph from the city of Ghent, and I'm very happy that we are looking back to look forward, as we call it. It also brings back the stress of 2 years ago of applying for this award. But thankfully, I have the slide winning the first EU Cities for Fair and Ethical Trade Award, and also why you should apply, of course. That is the main reason why we are here today. Some small points. The Ghent application, I'll go very quickly through a history of fair trade. How did we make the effort of making the application, then winning, and why you should apply? There was the Ghent application was also supported by a little movie. I will not bother you with showing you that movie again, because it was a good one, right? Yeah. But people of ITC and DG Trade, and especially in Ghent, we are bored of the movie by now because we've seen it so many times. But then again, it was also a very good mean of communication of telling about our application, about why we should be the European capital of fair trade. And it's still used in our communication, although it features the former mayor. We have a new mayor in the meantime, 2 years ago. It's a long time in politics. But if you look it up on YouTube, Ghent for Trade City, you will definitely find the video, so no worries, you can still find it. The award was a reward for a long time achievement. We call it the Long Time Achievement Award and within the city, because we already started a long time ago. Starting with a policy on North-South cooperation within the city in the 90s, introducing fair and procurement with, of course, fair coffee at the first product, but other products followed very soon. And in 2005, the first fair trade town in Belgium. You can see you should see a picture of the title of Fair Trade Town in City Hall in 2005. It seems like Cameras weren't that sharp in those days, in 2005, it's a long time ago. And in 2014, we have the launch of Ghent Fair Trade. It's a cooperation between the city of Ghent and Oxfam World Shop to promote fair and ethical trade within the city, to the Ghentians, to the people, to the public, and make sure that we have a capacity building network within the city. And that evolved into a first Fair Fashion Fest and the launch of a textile platform 1 year later. I'm happy to invite you for our 4th edition of the Fair Fashion Fest at the last weekend of April this year. But the first Fair Fashion Fest was held in 2015 and was a deliberate choice by our city and by Ghent Fair Trade to focus on textiles because, as Petra already said, the city's DNA is very important in this kind of story, and also in the story that we've written on fair trade and textiles. We are a textile city, and we see the textile production worldwide, how that is produced. So we wanted to make a point out of that, and that's why we chose for textiles, but not only to the broad public. There was a picture, but that's gone, so I'll just move on to the 3 pillars of Ghent Fair Trade: stimulate demand, increase supply, and leading by example. That's the focus, and that's also the story that we've been telling in our application for the award 2 years ago. Stimulate demand means inform people, raise awareness, increase supply, working together with our suppliers, working together with our fair fashion pioneers, with our shops who have fair trade products, and of course, leading by example. As a city, we have to give the good example. Stimulate demand by Fair Fashion Fest and other events to raise awareness, of course. Website, social media, also offline products like guides to inspire, all kinds of publications that we have to inspire the Ghentians. Increase supply with the textile platform. We have fair fashion talks, also publications, events. We support the different kind of shops that have fair trade products, and we bring our pioneers together through that textile platform, for example. But we are elaborating on that topic. We won't stay on food and textiles alone. We are looking for new product segments for this new legislation. We are looking in the terms of ICT, for example, or stone. Those are all products that have a global supply chain and where we want to have transparency in that global supply chain. Leading by example, this is an image of the toolbox socially responsible workwear that was also a big part of our application 2 years ago, because at that point, we were putting a lot of effort in that toolbox, and we still are. We are a consumer, and we can make the difference with our purchasing power by choosing for fair criteria in our tenders. We focused, of course, on textiles once again, like we did also in our communication and in our raising awareness. But we also buy textiles ourselves as a city, so we wanted to go for socially responsible workwear. Those were 3 different kinds of pillars in Ghent Fair Trade that we also put in our application 2 years ago, and that is how our story was made already within the city and very connected with the DNA of our city. But that was also the task of translating that into an application, of course, for the Fair and Ethical Trade Award, which was not always very easy because there is limited space. That's a benefit because you don't have to fill in hundreds of pages to be an applicant for this award. That is a good thing. On the other hand, sometimes you're telling a story and you feel that you need a little bit more space to tell it. But in the end, we got it all. We got it all told in our application, so that's not a thing to worry about. About transportation, actually, I thought that was a very good question. Also, that was not included in our award story or in our fair and ethical trade story from 2 years ago. It could have been a part of it, but because of lack of space, we made some choices, so we didn't do. But it would be very interesting to read that kind of stories in different kind of cities, of course, and different kind of applicants. Making the effort, because you all know that it is an effort to make an application like this. We are very aware. Writing the application takes time. It's a political decision. We needed a lot of time also to get this decided on a political level. And I cannot emphasize this enough. If you're not a member of a local authority, of a local administration, that you have to start in time by encouraging people to write this kind of application and get that mayor's approval. In Ghent, the story started already from within the city administration, because we are working on fair trade for a long time, and we also have personnel working on this topic. It was already started from within the administration, so it was a little bit easier. But you need time to have that political decision, that political approval, that mayor's approval. So don't forget to get that in time. But also capacity within the city administration. We all have busy jobs, and then someone says we should apply for an award. Of course, we should apply for an award. That's always fun to do. Only writing the application, who will do it, and who will take the capacity and time to do that is always another discussion. Of course, we did it with a lot of enthusiasm, but sometimes you have to take into account that it does take some capacity. We had to push forward with the believers within the organization, and as I said already, tell the story you have written, make a storyline out of what you do today, and make sure that that story sticks. Launch a campaign. It's a good tip I give you for any applicant. It was not something that we were thinking about of launching a campaign. We had, of course, the little movie and the hashtag Ghent for Trade City, but that was also because we were asked by our stakeholders and our network how they could contribute, because they also saw the efforts that were going into this kind of application. They wanted to know how they could contribute, how they could make an effort also together with us. That is also a part of the strength of this kind of application. I mean, people are very aware, if you're working together with different stakeholders, are very aware what you're doing at that point, and they want to get involved, especially if there's a competition and a prize, and people are like, ooh, are we going to win something? Then people are happy to get involved, of course. And many hours of hard work, I won't mention that too much, because you won't. Otherwise, you won't apply. Winning the Fair and Ethical Trade Award, that also was a picture of our dragon on the belfry in Ghent, is a symbolic picture, actually, because that is what winning this kind of award does. It gives you a very visual boost on the policy that you're writing at that point, and been writing for many years before that, but it is a very visual boost, and it gives a lot of local enthusiasm. Not only local, I think it's not only in Ghent that we felt that kind of enthusiasm for the award, but also outside of Ghent. If I'm talking about the stakeholders in the network that were promoting the hashtag Ghent for Trade City, that was also with our sister cities within Europe. It was with our international partners. At a certain point, I saw on social media a post passing by our Japanese sister city, Kanazawa. I was like, how did they find out this story? But it's fun to see, of course, but everybody got on board, and that is what an award application does, but what winning an award even does that more, of course. Why should you apply for the second edition? You should, point blank, but there are good arguments for that, of course. Applications encourage the efforts within the organization, for sure. I think that writing the application made it also possible for us to combine a lot of information that we already had about fair and ethical trade within our city. But this was the first time that we all put it together in one document, and that we had so much information on a central way available for us. But also in collaboration with our stakeholders, you start asking around. We had, of course, a couple of months the time to write this kind of application 2 years ago. It's the same, well, even a little bit more time now, but you start asking around about information that would be available. You're trying to sense the city's DNA, but also what's living within your stakeholders, and that also makes it a very encouraging story to do. Of course, the network of fair cities, it's been talked about, exchange of ideas and inspiration. I think you cannot underestimate the power of that kind of exchange that we have with cities like Lyon, with cities like Madrid and Malmö and Saarbrücken. The master plan, the way Petra already told about, we were looking at it, and it's amazing to see what kind of documents that they can deliver and they can provide to other cities like the city of Ghent. So it is inspiring. So if you would apply and not aim to win the grand prize, which you should, but then at least get shortlisted to be part of that network and have that exchange for the upcoming years. Winning awards helps always. It is something very fundamental that winning an award helps you to create your policy even further than it already is at this point. For example, we had local elections in 2018. We have a new mayor, we have a new coalition, we have the same deputy mayor to say that, but we have a new coalition. And this prize came at a very good time because it was in 2018 that we won the prize. There is almost no discussion in new policy plans about the aspirations that we have on fair and ethical trade within the city and about the ambitions that we want to put forward in our local policy. So this kind of awards help, of course, a lot to make that happen. And also the main prize made it possible to have that development project together with ITC and to work together with Sahnewal in India. I think we are moving forward on that project. We, as a city of Ghent, didn't have a real South project or a project in the global South at that point. We had a city-to-city cooperation for a long time with Mangaung in South Africa that ended in 2016. We were looking for a new project, and I mean, this is a kind of story that is very, very good for our South policy and is also very well connected, as Petra already said, very well connected with our DNA, with the story that we're trying to tell, with that textile story, with fair trade, fair consuming, fair production. And that only makes our story even stronger than it already is. This was the picture, but you've seen it in previous slides, of my deputy mayor with the ITC director and a commissioner. And if previous arguments didn't help you, then this argument, how many times do you get photo opportunities with a European commissioner? Not that many, so it's still used within Ghent that my deputy mayor was on the picture with the European Commission with Commissioner Malmström. Commissioner Malmström also visited the city of Ghent last year. That sounds pretty, well, that's just an activity and you shouldn't be aware of the fact that a commissioner is coming, but you cannot imagine what it does to your local authority and your local politicians to have someone like a European Commissioner for Trade visiting. I mean, I thought, yes, we got a message. Malmström wants to visit the city of Ghent. Is that possible? Of course. And the moment I sent out a mail within the organization, it was like all chaos broke loose because there was a commissioner coming. I didn't see that story coming up front, but it did also help the policy that we are writing today, because at a certain point, you're winning an award, there are commissioners coming to your city, and everybody is about fair trade, talking about fair trade and fair trade policy. Makes it a lot easier. Would the city of Ghent apply again if possible? Yes, exclamation mark. Yes, 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 we would, but we're not allowed, aren't we?
Not for one cycle. Not for one cycle.
Not for one cycle. So beware, we will be back in 2022. No, but we would do the effort again, definitely. I mean, the benefits that it made, the possibilities that we have to have that kind of South policy, to have that fair trade policy encouraged within our local policy, and have it embarked in our strategic multi-annual planning is something that is definitely a benefit from this award. So, cities be a sustainable trade champion, like the city of Ghent, of course. My email address is underneath that, and if you have any questions also about how you should do it and how to promote it, I would be happy to help you further with any questions. Any questions on this presentation? Besides the question, where are the pictures? They're lost in translation. Yes?
Did you manage to involve, apart from the city of Ghent, also other cities around Ghent, or would say the very province or the region of Ghent, with the projects?
Well, we were not the only city applying for the award 2 years ago. The city of Bruges, which is also in the you will also find in the report that's been published in January, and the city of Mechelen also applied within the Flanders region. And I don't think there were any applicants from the Walloon region, but we were together with 3 Flemish cities. We all already know each other because Belgium is a very small country. So it's not that hard to know who's working on fair trade within the region. The award didn't have a real contribution to that, but of course everyone in the Flemish region and from especially local authorities within the Flemish region now know that they are looking at Ghent for examples on fair and ethical trade. And for example, the whole toolbox on socially responsible workwear definitely got a boost within our region and within our province because of winning the award, because it was one of the points within our application. Any other questions? Or is everyone very hungry? Yes.
I got another question. You were talking a lot about the positive effects of having the chance to collaborate with an Indian city. But what are the effects inside the city? You mentioned the effects on the organization, which means the city of Ghent, but for the civil society, are there also projects started with the civil society?
We already work very closely with our civil society on the topic of fair trade, of course, and we have a lot of cooperations going on, but that also gave a boost because at the moment that a commissioner is coming, of members of European Parliament are coming, or at the point that we were winning in the award, they were all very proud and making, of course, PR about it and publication about it. So it really enforces your network also internally in the city with all your stakeholders, with your civil society, and in our case, with important players where we did have a connection with, our university, our ports, but you feel that kind of award also makes things moving within your civil society. As far as the connection with our Indian counterpart, Saniwal, is concerned, we still have the identification mission going on in 2 weeks' time, next week, yes. That's my colleague who will follow up that story. But so we will have to see how we can make that connection also with not only local authority at City Ghent and Saniwal at the other side, but also how we can intervene with the civil society on both parts.
So no further questions? So before we conclude, I just wanted to maybe give the word to Indre, if you have any wrap-up comments.
Yeah, maybe. I think it was a great opportunity to hear. I think it's very interesting to hear from a winning city what they have went through to actually be a champion of sustainable trade and what it takes and what it actually brings for a next city, because now we don't have many cities here in the room, but I would like to invite you to spread the word through your networks and hopefully to make the next edition, the second edition of this award, even more important from the value and the amount of applications we receive. We've received 18 last year. We're aiming for more. And so I think this is important if you can spread the word around. I think it's also going to be a good opportunity to the winning city to develop a new development project. We, of course, looking very much to those ones from the Teach Trade perspective, because it really brings this international angle, in addition to, for example, good procurement practices, how you look into your supply chain. So I think it's always a very good project and brings really tangible results, because you really speak about the citizens in the local municipalities and, you know, what every person or every small initiative can make as a change for the whole world. So I would like to invite you all to spread the word to become the next sustainable trade champion. And thank you very much for the whole team. Thank you for Christoph. Thank you for Petra, Joe. Thank you for Jessica and her team from Frenos for organizing this.
Hello. So thank you everyone for coming. As I think a lot of networking happened during the coffee breaks, which was basically our main mandate. And again, to let you know, Frenos is in Brussels with Arlois. So I'll be reaching out to the different people that we spoke to during the coffee break to set up meetings this coming week and the week after. And you will see on the website all the contact information for Frenos is on the contact page. So whenever you hesitate, you need more info, you're lost, confused, or very motivated, we're there a phone call away or an email away. Okay? Thank you. Thank you.